What? Generate another one? We will generate another one, thank you, please.
Oh, hold on, we got it. We got it. We got it.
Well, the fighting is like, there's too much. I think in large part, yeah, I think we had one guy, review, was, they put him up on the screen and they showed him and fights before, and there he is.
Speaker's gonna be sitting there?
Yeah. You could let it go from one corner. Unless you want.
No, I'm supposed to sit here and Daniel's supposed to sit there. You're fine there, yeah. Wi-Fi password.
He's adjusted to not sleeping.
I was on Rhode Island for like soccer.
Oh, really?
Did you go?
Yeah, I've been to Northern Ireland before.
He's figured out that the process to have one and two.
So they'll see Rangers. An old firm must be the ultimate.
Guy at the other place must look at you when you said, we're here for this.
Which one? Oh, at that other place? He's
Yeah.
like, no. Yeah. Yeah. Would we be here?
You thought we were there.
Yeah. Wonder why it would come up on that. It's put it somewhere on the west side.
Would that be bad?
You way over there? Okay. We're way out of our way. At least we weren't way out of our way.
Where are we right now? East side?
Dennis, did you get something?
No, I'll get something.
A couple of other kidneys removed.
Tell him, co-drinker.
I always say Connecticut.
Are you a coffee drinker?
No, not really.
He was here, he ended up in Connecticut.
I think it's more ways to drink coffee than guys.
Oh.
That's the way I see it. Like, I have all my guy friends, none of them drink coffee. Just the way I see it.
Oh, there's some coffee.
He's gonna cut down on that.
You like to drink coffee?
Oh, yeah. I used to be addicted to Pepsi.
You know, there's some guys who don't drink coffee as much.
I cut back on the soda a lot. I shouldn't drink it at all.
Should have been.
No. Coffee's a healthy.
Oh, yeah.
They're watching us eat, I guess.
Oh, it's been it won't take it. They said it would take it away.
Oh, so there they are. You're right now.
That'd be pretty scary, right?
Wow.
I was a really interested person.
Just use the microphone to amplify our voice here within the room. We don't really need it for the recording on the screen. And to turn it on, just press the button.
How are you?
You only need to I don't know if it's going to be a conversation going back and forth, or if you can first do this.
Yeah, this is more.
So where are you
And
guys
then
from?
we do.
I mean, I know you go to Mercy College. Well, like, do you live, did you come from outside New York to go to college there? Yeah. Brooklyn?
That's what the arms of the right hand.
Do you commute every day to school or do you live in?
Well, I only commute on Tuesdays, because I only go to nursery on Tuesdays, and the rest I have right here in 34th Street.
Oh,
Roughly this
That's
side, grew up
great.
from New Jersey.
Yeah.
are you all undergraduate?
Yes.
You're not
Most
getting
people are
like
from New York
PhDs.
to go university.
It's
about 95% of the
Where are you
population.
Probably, right?
Who goes to New
Oh,
York?
yeah, Long Island.
You find
Did you
people like
Harlem,
people. You
Brooklyn?
connect a few New Jersey people, 95% is New York.
Not that many international.
No.
There might
So
be
you
more from
just, do you
California.
live at home or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Softball team.
Yeah, but that's only like 20 some people.
Yeah, I know.
So what do you go down the
That
street?
is
It's just not that many.
That's
Yeah,
perfect where
because
you
we got
from.
Rutgers, we got Seton Hall, we got
All these different places.
We got
So-
ramen.
Montclair, Remco.
So
Yeah.
what year are you? Junior, senior? Sophomore?
Sophomore.
And are you majoring in sports management?
I don't know what I mean major is.
What's your major? I hope you learned something today, right? Okay, we're gonna start in about 4 minutes. Not to put too fine a point on it. Good thing I asked. Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
So you live
No, I do not live at Mercy College. I took the train to Penn Station today, it took me about an hour.
amazing.
I live in Bergen County, so it's not that bad.
Nothing. Okay, cool. I commute to
Oh, that's probably the same distance I gotta go. It's easy. 35 minutes, Frankfurt's focus and I'm here.
That's good. So are we?
Nadim, the coffee is here.
What's interesting?
Yes.
Great. But they can't hear it yet. I just don't want our little moments to get words.
Hi, Professor Daniel.
Can't hear you.
You
We
can't
can't
hear
hear you,
us?
sir.
Try it now.
Hello. One.
If you are hearing me, raise your hand.
Can you hear me? We hear you well, but it seems you are not hearing me.
What are you waiting for?
Nothing. This is a microphone.
But what about that one?
Yeah, that's.
Mic check.
So,
1, 2.
yep, let's get a check.
We can hear you, but the voice is being very delayed.
Oh, I see.
I think it's on now, right? My dear students of Beirut, can you hear me?
Raise your hands.
If you can hear me, can you raise your hands? Oh, great. Thank you. Can I switch it off and on?
Oh.
No.
No, it's this one. Now it's on sleep. It's not,
No, then we leave it on.
it's not on, so you can leave it on.
Is yours on as well, David?
I think so. I will tell you, do
Leave it on?
you want to get something to eat? Please help yourself. I don't want to force you. And after we're done, we'll go for maybe an hour. And if you would like to have more afterward, help yourself, please.
But how about you and the microphone?
I'll take it, I'm gonna grab it from you.
Okay.
I am not shy with the microphone. This microphone only amplifies in this room. That is a microphone, and it will amplify to Beirut.
All right.
Very good.
So, but sometimes this is like the longest table in New York, I think. And sometimes from that end to that end, we need a little help with amplification. Did you guys get food in Beirut? Have you eaten?
Yes.
We were lucky enough to eat.
Okay, good. It's great to see you all. And we're going to start. Welcome, everyone, especially our students here from Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry, New York. And welcome to Professor Daniel's class at AUB, plus some others maybe, or is this all your students?
All my students.
All your students. I've probably met some of you when I was there, right?
You did.
Okay, that's great. It's wonderful to see you in Beirut, and if you have questions as we go on, I hope you'll reach forward and hit that microphone and ask. How's that? And same in this room, you just have to speak loudly. Is that good? I don't think we have a problem with that, right?
No.
No, okay. Okay, my name is Allison Freeland, and I work here. We call this the Deb Center, AUB New York office. And this is what we call a New York Beirut briefing. And it means that we can bring some professors in from Beirut to give their perspective on some of the research they do in the Middle East. And then we hope that we can get one of their colleagues to come from the United States. And we do have that situation today, which is wonderful. So I would like to start by saying we're going to have a discussion. I hope you're in the right room. This is a discussion about sports policy, business, and politics. And we are also looking at the FIFA World Cup in Qatar in 2022 and some of the sports and political ramifications. It'll be great. We can make some predictions today. Welcome also, I want to say to some guests who've come. I know we have someone from Paris here. We have someone from the Russian mission. We're very international. Will, where are you? Brooklyn?
Upper West Side.
Upper West Side, that's great. Anyway, welcome to all. Is someone behind you? No, I'm just saying. And Nadine, yes, thank you for coming all the way from, what, 2 blocks?
2 blocks.
2 blocks, that's great. And we are delighted to have Dr. Daniel Reiche here with us from AUB, Professor of Comparative Politics, specializing in sports policy and politics. And among other publications, he has a newly released book that he has edited with Oxford University Press called Sports, Politics, and Society in the Middle East, right? And he's also frequently quoted in international media. And we have Dr. David Kilpatrick from Mercy College. Thank you for coming and for bringing your friends here. A professor of English literature and sport management at Mercy College, and also the director of the sport management program, right? And he's also the club historian of the New York Cosmos. I say that for anyone who remembers. And the author of something I won't pronounce well, Obrigado, a football epic. Is that Portuguese?
Yes.
That was my first words in Portuguese, that's good. And also comments on soccer in many worldwide media. I know we saw, in particular, your New York Times soccer blog entries, yes. So welcome to all of you. And what we'll do is, I'm going to start with a few questions because I've had a little while to think about this. And then I'm going to ask these 2 gentlemen some questions. And then I hope that you will interrupt and make some comments. And Beirut, we want you to be able to join in the conversation. So I wonder the best way maybe is just to hit the microphone and we'll hear you. Dennis, is that right?
Yeah.
I think. All right, great. And it's great to see you all there, and I know it's dark out, and I trust all are safe tonight. How's that? I'd like to start, Daniel, asking you, considering the kind of remarkable protests that have been happening on the streets of Lebanon in the last 2 weeks, since October 17th, I believe. I think when Mubarak was overthrown in Egypt in 2011, and when there was so much unrest in Turkey in 2013, that the football fans actually played a part in the uprisings. And I'm wondering about the participation of football fans, or fans in general, in Lebanon. Is there a connection? I will give you that.
Yes, I'm happy to answer this. First of all, I would like to say good evening to my students in Beirut and everybody who is watching the live stream on YouTube. And I would like to say that I'm very proud of all of you who participate peacefully in the protest for a better Lebanon, for a future of the country with less corruption and less sectarianism, and for a democratic development of the country. We are all very proud of you. For Alison's question, it's a little bit different to Egypt and Turkey, where football fans played a major role in the protest. Although in Lebanon, one of the most popular chants at the protest starts with Hela Hela Ho, and ends with a dedication to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which I don't want to quote at this point. But apart from this chant, no, football fans did not play a major role, because there are not many fans of Lebanese football. I was some weeks ago at a match of the national team playing against Turkmenistan. There were less than 10,000 people. At matches of the local leagues, there are only a few hundred people. And the reasons are related to the protest, because students, young people in Lebanon, they cannot identify with these clubs. Since 11 years, since I'm at AUB, I'm asking students, what's your favorite team? And 99% of the students are naming teams from the Premier League, or from Spain, France, Germany, Italy. They cannot identify with these clubs because the clubs, they play in the color of the party. Their shirts have the color of the party that's supporting them. They name their arenas after some political leaders. They have big pictures of political leaders in the stadiums. So this is the generation of young people who wants to end sectarianism. And by supporting foreign teams, this is like one form of showing that they want to end this. And we can also see the enthusiasm at World Cups in Lebanon. So I think there's no other place in the world where we have so many flags of different countries. When I came to Lebanon, I was thinking, oh, maybe students, young people choose their favorite national team based on like religion or ethnicity, but it's not the case. They just choose the national teams based on sympathy or some relations they have with their teams. So no, so we can see in the enthusiasm of the Lebanese for foreign teams and foreign national teams a desire to overcome the sectarianism in Lebanon.
Interesting. And looking ahead, David, to 2022, I'm just wondering, with your perspective on American football, we'll say that today. What do you think they are thinking of this first World Cup in the Middle East? What are some of the consequences and the perspective around this?
Well, my personal perspective was one of profound disappointment and shock when the World Cup was awarded to Qatar. We were probably guilty of hubris or overconfidence in assuming that the World Cup was ours. We felt we had the strongest bid. A good friend of mine, David Downs, was the chair of the committee. If you ever watch soccer in the United States or football in the United States and you see the ads in the corner, he was the gentleman who invented that idea back for the '94 World Cup, which was a wonderfully staged event, and we were very confident we'd be able to do so again. Bill Clinton was the honorary chair of that, and if you saw their jaws drop when the announcement was made, I was sitting in my living room on my couch, and I just fell back into my couch into silence for probably half an hour. Just absolute shock and dismay. I think the phrase that we always heard was 120 degrees in the shade. And so the prospect of hosting the tournament when it's traditionally held Again, the climate last year in Russia was quite amenable, but the prospect of hosting the World Cup in the middle of the summer in Qatar seemed to make that bid an absolute impossibility. So when that announcement was made from a very selfish, patriotic perspective, it was a really profound setback. Moving forward now, that it's a fact that it's probably going to happen. We have a shared World Cup that we will have with Mexico and Canada 4 years after that. So that's taken a little bit of the sting off it, perhaps. But it's going to be interesting to see how, now that it's going to be staged in the winter, how that'll interfere more with European club football than anything. I think the prospect of expanding the tournament means maybe we'll actually be able to participate this go around. Again, disappointment after disappointment. The fact that we didn't qualify for Russia is something that we're still, some of us are in denial about, and some of us are trying to make the reforms that we need. But we missed out on a great tournament in one way in terms of participants, but I believe there were more Americans there than any other nationality in Russia. So from a fan perspective, Americans didn't miss out, and everyone I know had the most amazing time there. The media, of course, tried to play up all the fears, and that was the case, but it didn't keep Americans from going to Russia last year. And I suspect that won't be the case when the World Cup is in Qatar. Again, the media likes to feed on certain negative stereotypes and don't appreciate the complexities of things, and I think we'll come around to it, especially if our team is there. We'll have boots on the ground on the pitch and certainly in the stands.
Daniel, would you like to comment on that as well? And there may be a few other opinions in this room, I imagine, but on the 120 degrees in the shade.
Well, I'm glad that the United States is hosting the 2026 World Cup by this makes sure that they can participate in the event. Yes, so when I started to look as a researcher on Qatar, I noticed that the entire discourse is driven by some of the issues David already mentioned, like the heat in the country, but also the large number of migrant workers and how they are treated. And these are important discussions, but when I was traveling for the first time to Qatar in 2013 and was working on my first paper on Qatar, I was thinking, what can I add to the discussion, because all the critical issues are already known. So I had a different objective and wanted to find out what are the factors that drive Qatar to invest so heavily into sports. What do they want to achieve by hosting so many mega sporting events? And I believe that Qatar is a unique case compared with other countries that hosted the World Cup, such as Russia. So other countries usually are driven by like contributing to national identity, to national pride, to improve infrastructure. The latter is certainly also true for Qatar, which is like developing according to the Qatar national vision. They want to be an advanced country by 2030. And of course, mega sporting events are a part of this development process. The FIFA World Cup 2022, for example, sets a timeline for the completion of the metro system in Doha. And the first metro is already operating. I've just been in Doha last week. It's quite impressive, the fast progress. But there are also some unique factors for Qatar, which wants to contribute to national security and gaining soft power by hosting mega sporting events. So Qatar is alarmed by what happened to Kuwait in 1990, which was invaded by Iraq. And Qatar is surrounded by two big, powerful countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I'm not sure how serious my argument was taken in 2014 when I said that they do this for national security purposes. But since Saudi Arabia started the blockade in mid-2017, I think everybody understands that the sport is a strategy for national security of Qatar. Sport put Qatar on the map. It gave them the opportunity to build relations with as many countries as possible. And maybe Saudi Arabia would have already invaded Qatar without hosting the World Cup and many other mega sporting events.
That's quite a statement. I'm wondering, Nadeem, do you have something you'd like to add to this?
Let me give you that.
Hello, my name is Nadeem Shhadi. I'm a student of Daniel because I was very lucky to have him when he was at Harvard. I was in the same city with the Tufts, and he introduced me to how relevant politics and sports are to each other. I had no idea before. And you know, the idea that two oil-producing states could compete via proxies, via sort of have a conflict via proxies should not be strange to Americans. I mean, I'm thinking of Oklahoma and Texas and the Sooners and the Longhorns. You know, that's so it's. But it's not surprising at all that football is linked to nationalism or tribalism or regionalism. Is it? I mean, and Qatar is, in a way, asserting its identity as a state vis-a-vis not only Saudi Arabia but also vis-a-vis its main. I think it's mainly competing with Dubai, not with Saudi Arabia on this. So it's putting itself on the map, giving itself a brand, doing the immense challenge of having a football match in 120 degrees in the shade. It's a big PR nationalist campaign. That's
Do you want to answer that? And then David, you may have some more thoughts on that.
I totally agree. Apart from the national security aspects, there is like a competition amongst GCC countries, which are countries that are, at the end of the day, not that different. Same ethnicity, they speak the same language, they eat the same food, they have the same religion. So sport, hosting like mega sporting events is one way to distinguish from each other. And Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Bahrain a little bit with hosting the Formula One, but Abu Dhabi and Dubai's strategies are not that different from Qatar's. I totally concur with that analysis.
I'm wondering, David, if you have a few comments you might want to make again, and then maybe we could turn to AUB, to College Hall B1. And after David, if any of you have a comment you'd like to make, I was thinking some of these opinions we've been hearing are pretty strong, and maybe you have a reaction. So, David, how about you?
Well, I think the other important element of the announcement of Qatar winning the World Cup bid is, of course, the corruption within FIFA that it's exposed. So ultimately, I think that's a great benefit for global sport that's been revealed. Ben Hammam really was a threat to Sepp Blatter, but ultimately Sepp Blatter and his regime was taken down. To what degree corruption has been rooted out of the game, I don't think any of us here are naive enough to think that that's really the case yet. But there's a great line in Daniel's book I honestly forget whose chapter it is, but if there is corruption in the sport, it certainly didn't start with Qatar. They were merely operating within the system that was in place, and they were working, for their own interests, of course. Now, the American response to this has been very aggressive. The indictments, and unfortunately, the one person who's been scapegoated domestically, Chuck Blazer, has passed away. So it's very easy to blame a ghost, isn't it? And I think there's a great deal of hypocrisy where people aren't recognizing the fact that there are plenty of other people who empowered Chuck Blazer and profited from him as well, and they're still very much in power. So the degree to which the FBI has really pursued all of the threads of corruption, we haven't really gone far enough, and I also think there's a great deal of hypocrisy domestically in terms of we think, okay, well, it was Chuck Blazer, but it was really those people down in Trinidad, it was really those people over in Switzerland, it was really those people over in Qatar, rather than looking at our own involvement with it. And so far, other than that one person who's no longer with us, people have, by and large, avoided the indictments that may still be coming down the road. Again, I don't think at this point awarding the World Cup to some other country because of that is in anybody's best interest. I think it's best for us to move forward, but to learn from what's been revealed in that process and try to move towards a more transparent and fair process for all nations moving forward. Again, the number of countries that have hosted Olympic Games, winter or summer, very few. Even fewer for FIFA. I think Qatar will be the 18th country to host the World Cup. So the idea of a World Cup in the Middle East, I think ultimately is for the good not only of the Middle East, but for everyone around the world. Anybody with a sense of global citizenship should want a World Cup to go to these different regions. But the question to which this will be a matter of soft power, or the phrase that keeps coming up in your book, soft disempowerment, right? I think that's the term that's used throughout. The attention that it brings to the host country isn't necessarily something that can always be controlled. But hopefully that attention will also provoke positive change, which again makes me want to just say to the people that are there in Beirut, the students there, how much we're watching everything going on there, and quite frankly, how humbled we are by your courage.
I wonder, Daniel, if you could talk about soft disempowerment and then perhaps check in with your students and see if there's some reaction there.
Yeah, the problem with soft power is, what is soft power? It means that countries aiming for attractiveness, to be perceived by others as attractive. But the problem is this depends on the recipient. Sometimes governments think that, all right, we host this event, we win that many medals at that international championship, we invest in this cultural exchange program, but it's not that easy. At the very end, it depends on how others perceive a country. And I think for Qatar, this has been a learning curve, because after hosting the 2006 Asian Games, they were thinking they're ready for the big stage, but they noticed it's much more difficult, the global public, Western media, compared with the continental public. So overall, the big question is, will the World Cup be a driver for social change in Qatar? I believe so. Qatar will not turn into a second Norway, so they will modernize, but on their own terms. I was pleased to follow the latest news when the Qatari government announced that by the beginning of the next year they would introduce a minimum wage and they would end the kafala, the sponsorship system. So I hope there is some history of announcements and not everything has been implemented, but I think they know they need to change to get positive perceptions from all over the world, and I'm confident there will be some changes which would also distinguish them from other countries in the region. So I'm slightly optimistic.
Do you want to see what we
Yes,
have?
to my students. What questions do you have to me or Professor Kilpatrick?
Hi, can you hear okay?
Yes.
So on the subject of soft power, you've discussed the, I'd say, almost nationalist in character sporting investments of the GCC. How would you relate those to investments in foreign sporting endeavours? I'm thinking of, for example, things like Manchester City in the UK.
Yeah, we actually stopped on the way here. Our class, we stopped by the Adidas flagship store, the Puma flagship store, and in both of those stores, you saw Fly Emirates, Etihad. Anyone else I'm leaving out? Any other sponsorships? Again, these displays of that kind of soft power in terms of football sponsorship, and again in the form of Qatar, most notably with their control of Paris Saint-Germain. Again, I think. You're probably right. The article that came out from you a few years ago, it was very startling and well, how is this a matter of domestic security? But now that argument rings very true, does it not? And in the kind of friendships that they're making, I think in some ways, I know we're also both handball fans. I think the handball World Cup that was hosted there in 2015, right? I think in some ways that backfired because of the policies of bringing players on. I know that you've done a lot of work on that in terms of the naturalization process. With football, that's not really a possibility. But I think you're absolutely right that investment in those foreign clubs, and now it looks like there'll be an investment with Leeds United too. I don't know how close they are to finishing that deal. Has anybody heard anything in the last 24 hours? But it may be that Qatar is going to try to make Leeds United become the next Manchester City. So again, the Middle Eastern influence on the game in the continent and also in the UK, whether England will be part of the European picture or not remains to be seen to some degree. But Leeds, a once great club, may rise back up because of Qatari investment. So a lot of the fans, I think, are quite welcoming of it at this point.
One of the reasons why David and I are friends is because he's the only American I know who is interested in handball. Usually I have to explain to Americans that sport. I think for the question, Thomas, is very good. And I think one of the most remarkable developments over the last years has been the transfer from Neymar from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain, which happened in summer 2017, few weeks after Saudi started its blockade. And one needs to see this in context because this transfer economically made no sense. It was completely overpriced, but it gave Qatar the opportunity to change the narrative and to take attention away from the blockade. And as foreign policy, the journal recently titled in an article, Qatar won the blockade. They won the blockade. Saudi Arabia was not successful. And this was part of winning the blockade to change the narrative and to show how much they can achieve. And no, I think for Qatar, the sport investments totally paid off.
Also, we both like to watch beIN Sports.
Yes.
Which again is another expression of that soft power for Qatar, for us to be able to follow the high quality league play that we need to see. Again, it is a need. It's not a want. It's a need. And so Qatar is meeting that need for us. So that does kind of tend to make us see them on a more friendly basis.
Right.
Can we see if there's another?
Do we have more questions from Beirut?
See if their hand is.
Someone wearing an England shirt.
No, my students are usually not that shy, so I think there was one.
This is not a question, it's more like a comment about the 2022 World Cup. So I was going to say, like, there are so many countries that are betting on Qatar, and maybe it's like the chance of the failure of the World Cup, and maybe that I thought that was a way for it to be disempowered, like the soft disempowerment of maybe Qatar. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you were a little bit muffled there. Did you say something about people betting on Qatar failing? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said.
Yeah, I think that's the way the media has drummed it up. If you saw the media frenzy that the English put up about the World Cup in Russia, they wanted that to fail so desperately, but it didn't. And I think, again, fear sells. And so the build-up towards the tournament, expectations being lowered as possible, will actually maybe work to Qatar's benefit if they do pull off this tournament. And I think we've every reason to think that they'll have the facilities to deliver. A lot of people are concerned about their alcohol consumption. They want to make sure that you're getting drunk before and after the matches. And so again, will there be some alcohol-free zones and things like that? I know for a lot of people who really love their football, that's the number one thing they mention. Well, I'm not gonna go, I don't even think I'll be able to drink there. But again, to answer your question, I think that the success would be rather deliverable in that way, don't you think? Do you think, since you asked that question, do you think that they'll be able to overcome those obstacles or the perceived failure? I think you're quite right that a lot of people are expecting failure.
I guess, yeah, it is possible because they're really investing heavily into especially like the infrastructure and the facilities. So I think the world is going to be impressed when the time comes for them.
I wondered, do we have a comment? Kadeem? David, could you just hand him that microphone? That'd be great. Hi. You just can't help yourself, right? This is great.
Good afternoon. My question is, because I have to leave right now, because I have to go back downstairs. But my question is, as it relates to some of the disadvantages of the Qatar thing. One of the concerns raised was that the homosexuality is illegal there, and a lot of the players and fans who were going there are concerned. I think Sepp Blatter spoke about it. I don't remember what he said. But is that a major turn-off for people who will be going to Qatar?
Well, I think we need a general debate about under which conditions and what are the standards to award mega sporting events to countries.
Yes.
So, because so far it's mainly about providing the infrastructure to be able to organize a tournament. And I mean, homosexuality is illegal in many Arab countries, including Qatar, that's true. I don't know the legal situation in Russia, but so I noticed that there is now more debate on Qatar than it was on Russia.
Yes, it is.
And I don't know why, maybe because it's a smaller country. But I totally concur with you. A broad debate is needed under which standards mega sporting events should be awarded to countries. We also had the Summer Olympics in China. The Muslim minority in China is treated very bad. So that's also one of the issues that should be taken into consideration. So yes, it's very important to have a discussion on the standards that host countries need to fulfill to host such mega sporting events. Because hosting the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup, at the end of the day, it's considered as a reward for a country, right? And under which conditions we want to give countries such a reward. I think that's an important discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question that a lot of people are really concerned about. The IOC, or the International Olympic Committee, has done a really good job of aligning with the United Nations and their Declaration of Human Rights and making sure that that people are protected. FIFA is working more closely. Again, some of this is discussed in different passages in Daniel's new book. But also keep in mind, as much change has occurred in the United States, we've still got a long ways to go. There's certain non-procreative sex acts are still illegal in some states. So homoerotic activity would fall into those categories. So we can be very hypocritical and look to other countries and say, oh, look how you haven't progressed, without really looking in our own house to make sure that. So we've still got a long way to go to provide the equality that we promised everyone here too. But I do think, again, this is where the focus on the country, and again, if Qatar is to deliver on what they really want, and again, it's not really for their own citizens' pride, it's to form these partnerships. They're going to have to protect people from the fear of that being considered criminal activity. It just simply cannot be. Now, I would prefer, quite frankly, that FIFA or the IOC would never award anything to any country where that would be the case. I'm optimistic enough to think that sport can provoke and promote positive social change.
Yusuf, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had
Just hold that
Yeah,
there.
I just had a comment and also a question. I read a few years ago an article on The Intercept on how I think it was the UAE ambassador trying to provoke maybe a financial crisis on Qatari bonds, maybe. Basically trying to force them to give up the organization of the World Cup. Is there any truth to that behind it? And the second question, would you say that the World Cup organization is one of the reasons of the blockade, or trying to make it fail could be, I would say, one of the objectives of, not one of the reasons, but a consequence of the blockade?
No, one of the main reasons for the blockade is Qatari TV station Al Jazeera, which tends to critically report about political developments in many countries. There is certainly the need to develop a more critical reporting about domestic affairs. But this has upset neighboring countries. And for the World Cup, the FIFA president, who is, by the way, married to a Lebanese woman, my running gag is that he wants to increase the number of participating countries in the World Cup from 32 to 48 to make sure that Lebanon can participate one day. So he wanted to push this already for the World Cup in Qatar. And the organizing committee in Qatar was quite upset about it because they knew it would be very difficult in such a small country to host an event with 48 countries. And so there was a concern that they might have to co-share the pleasure of hosting with some of the neighboring countries they don't like. But at the very end, it was decided that the extension will happen in 2026, when the United States, Canada, and Mexico are co-hosting the event. And I believe co-hosting is the future of mega sporting events. I believe it's the last time that we will have such a big event in such a small country. And the United States certainly would be able to host such an event by itself because it's so many stadiums, the infrastructure is ready. So this was more like for political reasons in times where, the country has a president that wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. So the US is one of the few countries that could host such an event by itself. But it's good, and we have also in European sport, we had like handball, basketball, European championships that were co-hosted by some countries. So I believe that's the future of mega sporting events, to co-host them.
I wonder if you both could talk a little bit about facilities, the issue of what happens to these enormous facilities after the event is over.
So we could look back to Brazil or Russia. The experience has not been very well. Some of the facilities that were built are were not needed at that locations, and both are federal countries, so they had to, for political reasons, they had to spread the pleasure of hosting throughout the country. But some of the stadiums that were built are not really needed. So in the academic literature, this is called white elephants, when we build an infrastructure that's not being used anymore after the event. And when talking about, because the question was so excellent before, on the criteria for awarding mega sporting events to countries. So a legacy management program should be one of the conditions, because now we just look at, is a country able to organize the event well? Yes, the World Cup in Russia was great. The World Cup in Brazil was great. The World Cup in Qatar will be great, I'm sure. But what's happening with infrastructure afterwards is a very important aspect. And so having a legacy management program where countries prove that there is a need for the infrastructure that they build also after the event is very important.
I wonder, David, if you'd comment on that, and then we have a question online, I think, too.
I think another example in
in Lebanon would be the football stadium in Tripoli, right?
Yes.
That's another white elephant, and again, so many of the stadia in Brazil that are just far too large for any need, and South Africa, of course, has been in situations. We're a bit blessed in the United States to have these mega stadia that suit mega events so well, but the idea of, okay, we've got this beautiful new stadium, we had a crowd of 80,000, what do we do when our football club in its league play only draws 800 people? It's not very good atmosphere to be in something empty like that, and it's also very costly to maintain stadia, right? The facility management and event management is a complicated business, and again, another point I think that's brought out in your book is sometimes, perhaps due to corruption, people that are responsible for managing such facilities have no sport management training whatsoever. And so, maybe the allocation of money is there, but the facility itself is falling apart. So you see, I think one anecdote in the book was one of flags were left over from a tournament from 12 years before, something absurd like that, where just, that surely there have been cleaning bills in between then. These large stadia can look really beautiful and be very breathtaking, but years after the event, keeping them up is quite a challenge.
Robert, could you hand that microphone to Justin, I think?
I'm gonna paraphrase a bit of this question from Zeko Sujat. I guess always with these large sporting events and big events, one of the concerns is safety, public safety. And he was wondering what ways are the Qatari government working to ensure the safety of the fans and players, and has there been, like, I guess, a social media campaign or whatever to ensure people of this, that it's going to be safe, basically?
Safety has become a big issue at mega sporting events since Summer Olympic Games 1972 in Munich, when there was a terrorist act against an Israeli delegation. And since then, the security costs have increased event by event. So, also Qatar will have to invest, of course, a lot of money into the security of the event. So this World Cup won't be an exception to other mega sporting events that the cost to provide the world with a safe event where something like 1972 is not happening. So this will be no exception to that World Cup.
I think a lot of it depends on the nations that qualify. The fan groups can make all the difference in the world. I had 2 years ago, I had met with / interviewed one self-described hooligan who was a West Ham fan, who was excited to go to Russia to perhaps die for England. That was his ambition. He was excited to go and fight. But we didn't see those fights manifest. However, the crowd control was, and the reports of fight clubs in the forests and things like that, and the idea of Russians ready for, and up for the fight with the English, we never heard anything about it. So whether he got the opportunity to die for England, or if he left England and made it to Russia, don't know, but he certainly liked to brag that he was up for such a fight. So it really depends on what countries are going there, how do they screen their own people, how well are they preventing their country from disrepute. And of course, some nations have received bans because of their traveling fans and their misbehavior. So I think that's a really key element to answer your question, in all honesty, is what nations are actually going to qualify, and then how well behaved will their fans be.
I wonder if we could just touch on the topic of naturalization of athletes. Just some of your perspective on that, at least as far as it pertains to Qatar.
Yeah, Qatar is a small country. It has a population of around 2,700,000 people, but only 11% of them are Qatari citizens, so the rest are foreigners. So the population base is very small, now Qatar is investing so much into sports, is hosting so many mega sporting events. The disadvantage is you always need a local team to compete in that event. And Qatar has heavily relied on naturalizations over the last years. David mentioned the example of the handball team in 2015. That World Cup was quite traumatizing for me as a German citizen, since Germany lost the quarterfinal against Qatar, and I had already booked my flight to the final weekend. So I still went there, and so that team was mainly comprised of Europeans. But this also depends on the rules by the respective international federation. And the rules in handball make it quite easy to change nationality. In FIFA, it's much more difficult. One needs to live in that country after age 18 for at least 5 years. And the Qatari national football team relies less on naturalized athletes than national teams of Qatar and other sports. For the future, I believe the question is whether Qatar should not more focus on some sports. So that's a conversation I had with people in Qatar, from the Qatar National Olympic Committee, for example, that I asked, why are you not focusing? It's such a small country. There are like other small countries like Iceland who have been pretty successful by focusing on handball and football, for example. So I think so far Qatar is not has not really a strategy on focusing on some sports. Even developed countries, even larger countries, often focus on specific sports. So I think that's something Qatar should do, to be less reliant on naturalized athletes. At the end, all countries naturalize, but Qatar has done it to an extent in the last years that was also not good for the image of the country. There were so many negative articles in the international media about the 2015 national handball team. So to have a more healthy proportion of foreign-born athletes, I think it would be better to focus on few sports for the future in the country.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more questions, but David, do you want to also talk about that for a minute?
No, I was just going to say that, the handball rule is actually so liberal that it's you just couldn't have played for your national team in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So I believe there was even one player on that team who had represented 4 different nations in his career. So that reaches a point of absurdity. The United States does tend to kind of lean very heavily in some years on dual citizenship, finding out whose mom may have been stationed near an army base or something like that. And so the idea of what really constitutes citizenship and the right to represent whatever, but elite athletes very much are often motivated by a certain hunger for social mobility. And that 11% in Qatar, they're very well off.
Yes.
So the aspirations to try to make it as an elite athlete, the motivations just really aren't there.
Please. That's very important. Qatar is a very academically oriented society, and many children who are keen to be good in sports need to convince their parents to pursue their sporting careers, because the social recognition of a sport, sporting excellence is not that high as we know it from other countries like the US or Germany, where it's a tool for social mobility.
I'm wondering if we have any more comments do we have any more comments from College Hall on any of these topics in the last few minutes? I don't want to
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Please.
So I was reading an article about the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, and they were saying that some construction companies were, while constructing for the World Cup or investing in some stadiums, there were actions of money laundering. Mm-hmm. To what extent do you think that the 2022 World Cup in Qatar will be corruption-free?
Oh God.
Well, there is a corruption index by Transparency International, I believe. And if there is a lot of corruption in a country like Lebanon, it's of course naive to think that when such a country is hosting a sporting event that this would be different from like general patterns of corruption in that country. So I would leave it with such a general answer. So I would look at like the general prevalence of corruption in the country to get an answer to that. I don't think sport is like deviating from general trends of corruption in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we could be so naive as to think that this will be corruption-free. However, again, the scandal within FIFA has brought so much attention to corruption that maybe we will be moving towards that direction a little bit more. There'll be greater scrutiny. I don't think it could be eliminated any more so than it is anywhere. Would that we could find such a place that perhaps Plato Socrates didn't imagine as free of corruption and an ideal society. We haven't found that yet. But
when the World Cup was awarded to Qatar, a decision that was indeed quite surprising. There were 22 men deciding on who gets the event, the executive committee of FIFA. Such a system where so few people make such a major decision is, of course, tentative for corruption. So one a good legacy of this much criticized process is that now the entire FIFA assembly decides on the World Cup host. So the 2026 World Cup was, so all the countries that are member of FIFA had a vote.
How many?
There are more than 200. So UN has 193. FIFA has, somebody needs to check online, it's
Because
like
of
211 or
Scotland,
something.
yeah.
So each country had a vote. And there were not only the US bidding, was also Morocco bidding. And I don't know what would have happened in the old system, but in the new system there was like, as I would say, the rational outcome of the process, because it's just rational to give the event to the US. No other country has all the infrastructure ready. Plus, also from a sports business perspective, it's a growing market, and so there's still a lot of potential for soccer to develop here in the country. So I think it makes sense to give the event to the United States.
Any more comments from Beirut? I think I see one.
Yeah. Obviously, a big factor of the mega sporting events is having people across the world come together. Do you think the tournament being held in a Middle Eastern country will help with that effect, or do you think it will diminish? Thank you so much.
You should not think before we answer. Yeah. Yes, I think there are prejudices about the Middle East. Maybe David, who is also the club historian of the New York Cosmos, can tell us what happened when Emirates, the airline, became a sponsor of the New York Cosmos. I believe this was not perceived everywhere well, right?
well, yeah, Emirates was our sponsor for 4 seasons and did a great deal of good for us as a club. We had a really great relationship with that airline. But we also had some other investment from the Middle East, and when certain things didn't play out, the funds ran dry. And you may also be alluding to when the Cosmos went to Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago. When we went to Cuba,
I did not plan to mention it.
yeah, so when I was in the delegation, went to with the Cosmos to Cuba, we were the first team to go since the embargo had been lifted under the Obama administration. And our fan base was overwhelmingly supportive of that. Very small percentage of mostly people sympathetic with the Cuban expatriate cause were a little bit upset by that, felt that was a little bit of a betrayal. But that was a minority of our fan base. But the majority of our fan base seemed rather upset when we went to Saudi Arabia. because of issues that have already been raised here, and the idea that that regime is. We were also going at the same time that President Trump was there, and some fans were worried that we would look too much like a political tool, and also that we were playing somewhere we really shouldn't play. Although my perspective as club historian was that the Cosmos represent cosmopolitanism, and if you're invited somewhere, you go. And that hopefully you by establishing some degree of friendship, you can move in a more positive direction. So again, I really see things in that way, and that ultimately, the more we get to know one another and play together in sport, the closer we become, rather than the further apart we grow. The degree to which sport can be a substitute for war or antidote to such instincts is something that certainly from the 19th century on, a lot of people have been optimistic about, and I think ultimately that's the case. But again, sometimes depending on who you partner up with or where you go, you may be thinking you're doing the right thing, but your fans may think precisely the opposite.
You're going quiet?
Well, I have to admit, as an enthusiastic Hannover 96 fan, if my club would go to Saudi Arabia, I think I would be upset, since it's one out of two countries that is not admitting women to the stadiums. And I think practicing and watching sport is a human right. And so I can understand that there was a controversial discussion among the Cosmos fans, because of course one could argue, well, we might contribute to some change when we go there. But on the other hand, you might also give legitimacy and justification to a regime that you don't want to support. So just for the record, in Qatar, women can go into stadiums.
Well, and of course also the FIFA has mandated that they have a women's national team. So it's another positive development there, right? That Qatar now has a women's national team.
I think we'll draw to a close in the next few minutes. Nadeem, I know you have something you'd like to say.
Oh, just a small anecdote. I was in one of these conferences with think tank people who know everything, and they get carried away with scenarios, and there's ISIS, and there's war, and there's Iraq, and there's intervention, and there's Iran, and all that, and the Middle East is going to fall apart, and the artificial borders, and all this. And someone just said, a colleague said, FIFA thinks Qatar will still be around in 2022.
That's good. That's great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then in Beirut, if you would like to make a closing comment, we would love that. I think. Oh, is there one already?
I have a comment. Yeah, so there's the Club World Cup happening next month, and I was reading an article today in the morning that one of the teams participating, Liverpool, were given a hotel to stay there, and they objected that decision because of the previous attacks on the migrant workers and their conditions. So my question is, how will this affect the national teams in the 2022 World Cup?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I know Poku, you're a Liverpool supporter.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard anything about these specifics.
I heard about the one with how mostly Jordan Club he doesn't want the team, at least the B team, to not go because it's conflicting with the Capital One Cup and the FIFA Club.
So that's an interesting question too. Jurgen Klopp, the manager of Liverpool, of course, is a very social progressive and doesn't hide his politics whatsoever. He's been overly critical. Well, not overly critical. He's been very critical of Brexit. So that would be an interesting development if he had said anything politically about there. But I
mean,
I
he's
do
still
think
sending
that
the first team. He's just not sending everybody due to the fact that the schedule. Because I think the game is on the 17th, and then the 18th we play Capital One.
So it's a matter of fixture congestion.
Yes.
And again, that's another question in terms of the World Cup
being
itself.
in the winter.
FIFA's trying to make the Club World Cup more
attractive.
Yeah, it's something, well, again, a lot of the time it had been it was in Japan for a large number of years, and I know for an American viewership, you have to wait really early to watch that final. It doesn't seem to be as prestigious as FIFA wants it to be, and that is, in all honesty, a way of breaking, a more post-nationalist way of looking at global football. Again, that also goes back to the question earlier about the degree to which the Middle Eastern soft powers manifest in the club game, the sponsorships. I think the Club World Cup coming up is a really interesting barometer in terms of how things are. But again, it's so few teams playing so few games. It's nowhere near the scale or prestige of the World Cup itself. The Men's World Cup, we keep calling it the World Cup, but I think we should probably say the Men's World Cup. At least here in the United States, we like to be proud of winning the women's one. So it's the Men's World Cup. I think that's something to pay attention to. You may be surprised that here in New York, there's no shortage of Liverpool fans.
Any more from Beirut, do you think, for students? I think maybe I would close by asking each of you gentlemen to look ahead to 2026. Why not skip a few years and give us some predictions on maybe the issues that could surround that and some of your hopes. I'll give you this.
2022 or 2026?
2026.
Oh, okay.
I'm really skipping.
Okay.
I hope for David that the Cosmos will be included in the Major League of Soccer by then. No, I think 2026 will be a great World Cup. All the infrastructure is ready in the US. It will be a strong signal towards co-hosting of mega sporting events to host together with Mexico and Canada. And it will be the first World Cup with 48 countries. That was criticized by some, but I believe football is the most global sport, so there should be no problem to have 48 strong countries in that tournament. So I expect this to be a great tournament, which will most likely not be scheduled in the winter as 2022.
Great, David.
Well, my first prediction would be that a few people at this table will have jobs during that tournament. I know that sport management students right now are looking to 2026 thinking, okay, well, what job will I have? And we're really hopeful. It hasn't been confirmed or made official, but we believe the final will be played just across the Hudson River here at MetLife Stadium. So certainly it'll be part of our lives coming up. I think there's a lot that's wrong with U.S. soccer. That in some ways I'm concerned that hosting the World Cup just glosses over that, when maybe hosting the World Cup should be something to provoke positive change here in terms of the way the game is structured. We don't abide by FIFA's own statutes on sporting integrity, with the lack of promotion relegations that you alluded to in terms of accessibility and inclusion. It's very much slanted towards the billionaires here. And one thing that I will say in terms of a prediction for 2026, it'll be a blast. It'll be very well attended. Americans love mega events. The 1994 World Cup was a tremendous success, but it didn't carry over in terms of sustained interest in the domestic game on a week-to-week basis. I think that's where we failed since 1994. We haven't made soccer part of our daily lives. We have probably more Premier League fans at the table than we do fans of domestic clubs. Isn't that a fair thing to say, guys? We haven't achieved whatever there yet. And I'd like to think that the United States will do better than Mexico and Canada in that tournament. But if the loss to Canada a couple weeks ago is any barometer, we're lucky we're hosting and we won't have to qualify.
Do you have a final comment? All right. I want to thank you all. You've been wonderful, and thank you, Yusuf, for coming, and Nadine for adding your comments. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming all the way from Mercy College. Thank you all in Beirut for coming out in the evening. And as has been mentioned, you are very much in our focus these days. And we are very thankful for what you're doing. And thank you to everyone at the table, and especially to David and for Daniel for traveling far and wide to come and talk. And I was thinking, anyone who's interested, either in Beirut or here, I'm going to make an offer for you that you get these gentlemen's email address, and if you have questions that come up and opinions that you really want to express, I think you should be able to email them and say your piece.
Both the professors are hyperactive on social media.
Oh, there we
so
go.
The best thing to approach them is on Twitter, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the Twitter handles that we can give out?
For me, it's Politics of Sports.
For me, it's at Dr. D. Kilpatrick, I think it is.
All right, I thank you all. And we'll sign off with Beirut. I hope there's still a sandwich there if you want it.
Thank you so much for having us.
We'll be seeing you. Cheers. In this room, if you'd like to carry on the conversation or have an argument, please do.